and welcome to Good Enough Chats. My name's Dan Bauscher. I'm the host and producer of the show. And before we jump into this episode, I just want to take a couple of minutes to explain to you what we're going to be covering in this conversation. So this is a discussion with John Lyons, and during this, he talks through a sequence of events that each of which had a major impact on his mental health and cumulatively conspired to take him to the darkest of places. He talks about how he was affected by the sudden loss of his brother. He then was diagnosed with cancer, and then his marriage broke down shortly before the first lockdown, which then left him in a position of extreme isolation and loneliness as he was given limited access to his kids during that first lockdown phase. But the reason that you need to listen to this is because John is here to tell the story, and that's so important. He has been through each of these stages, and each one of these has really knocked him for six. And that cumulative impact of those things has been devastating. But he's lived through it. He is here. He's on the other side of it, and he has an important story to tell. So I hope that you find this helpful. If you do, please share this with other people. Let other people know about it, people who you know are going through a difficult time at the moment, because this kind of story could be incredibly helpful for them to find hope. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Hi, Dan. I'm good. I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I'm good. I fired up the aircon unit because, summer, isn't it? So that means that earlier on in the week we were on the verge of being drowned out of the country and shivering in the corner, and now we're melting. But it's a lovely day. Sky's out, the sun's out, and I've got plans later on this evening that I fully intend to lean into both the blue sky and the sun being out in a beer garden. Which,
hey, nice.
Excellent.
Very nice. I'm jealous.
Well, I'm jealous of the Lego guy over your shoulder. The non too subtle plug there.
That's actually my daughter's storage cube. Well, storage head. So my son's got a storage cube that is sat on, where he's got a lot of his Lego. And she's got her Lego in that one over there. And I just decided I might as well put my hat on it.
Yeah, quite right. Well, John, for the benefit of our viewing public, our listening audience, could you introduce yourself, name, age, where you're from, what you do, and whether or not it's appropriate to put pineapple on pizza?
Wow. That's going to be quite a strong response, I'll tell you now. So I'm John Lyons. I'm 52 now. Originally from Southeast London. Kind of spent most of my life in London. We'll probably get onto the reasons why I'm not in London a little bit later. I now live in Loughton, Essex, on the London-Essex border, or what I like to think of as gammon on the Prosecco. I'm a professional marketer, so I work as a fractional CMO now. I've been in marketing for 25 years, having started life as an architect. Through my tutor who taught me how to use CAD, kind of do drawing and Photoshop, got into this brand new thing called the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, as we called it back in the mid-90s, in the very early days of the web, like the first year or two. And was so fascinated, I taught myself how to design and build websites. As an architect, I had a slightly different approach from the print designers who just wanted to put billboards onto people's screens, and the coders who just wanted everything to be a list and data and knowledge. And so I managed to find a way of kind of building a side hustle that became the full-time hustle that then led me into digital marketing, promotional marketing, running my own agencies, and kind of now as a fractional CMO working with jewelry brand, with a comms business, with a data company. I've got two kids. So my son Stanley is going to be 10 this week, and my daughter Dina is going to be 6 later this year. Um, and that's me really.
Excellent.
Now, pineapple on pizza. My son used to really like pineapple on pizza, and I feel really guilty because I think I talked him out of it by being very, very strong on my feelings about pineapple on pizza. I mean, I'm going to go there, Dan, but basically, it's the choice of a cunt, right? So, not that I said that to my son, obviously. Although, actually, the worst thing I've ever seen, and this was at a CMO event, we had chips on a pizza.
I mean, that's just too many carbs.
Well, you say that, right? My favorite ever pizza, and I had this in Naples. Thin slices of potato on a white sauce with rosemary, and it's just the best thing ever. Unfortunately, I've since been diagnosed with diabetes, and I just can't eat that much carb. So, but yeah, chips on a pizza is an odd one.
I saw something, as you know, as we do these days, when you go onto Facebook or Instagram, you're served random content, and I was served a promotional video from, I believe, a Stoke-based chippy that was deep frying a chip butty,
Oh wow.
and I just thought the one word I have to go with that immediately is claggy.
Yeah, that's hardcore. So I remember the first time I went up to Scotland. Um, yeah, because obviously you got the Mars bars and stuff like that, and actually, yeah, I could only eat a third of it, but battered deep fried Mars bar is amazing. Um, but it was the deep fried battered pizza
No,
uh, that got me. I just, yeah,
just no.
no.
That's not acceptable. We're going
Well,
to draw a line under that part of the conversation there. I feel tired just thinking about the amount of carbohydrate that would involve and the impact that it would have on my body. So no, we don't need any more of the deep fried pizza conversation.
okay. We'll
Okay,
move on from deep fried.
move on. Um, thank you, John. Thank you for that introduction. We'll jump straight into the questions. And question number one, as always, is why are you here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health?
Um, because I think it can make a difference. I think talking makes a difference. It certainly made a difference to me. I wouldn't be here today if there wasn't someone, Gemma Higgins, if if she weren't there to make me speak, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be planning my son's 10th birthday this weekend and buying loads of stuff and getting the flat ready and genuinely looking forward to it. So I have in the past talked about my mental health and my mental health crises. Um, and what I've found is, yeah, there's a lot of warmth. There's a lot of warmth, but also there are people that say thank you. This is what I've been going through. I'm not alone. And I think the thing when you've gone through a mental health crisis, and it is even more so for men, because we've got this whole bravado and blah blah blah. Knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you can talk, knowing that there are people that can understand, I think is important. And so it's not out of a sense of duty in that I feel like I must do it, but I believe it can help and I want to help. So that's why I'm here today. You know, to talk about what I've been through brutally and honestly. And because I genuinely feel that vulnerability is a superpower. It's the only way, personally, it's only when I've been at my most vulnerable that I've been able to see things for what they really are
Mm,
and to see not just my weaknesses, but my strengths, to see not just those kind of, warm weather friends, but those real friends. And to have the clarity of mind to see a way out.
I agree. I agree. And that is
the entire premise of this show. Um, and I don't think it's something you can repeat enough. Um, my personal experience uh, of mental health challenges resulted in part because of the isolation that I felt. You know, you feel like it's just you that's going through it
Yeah,
because people don't talk about it. It's not a normal, or it hasn't been a normal thing for blokes in particular to just open up in front of their mates. You know, when somebody says, "How are you doing?" we don't really answer the question honestly. And my whole thing is, if we can do a little bit to help more guys feel like they can answer that question honestly, and encourage other blokes when they're hearing that stuff to not awkwardly change the subject because it's a bit icky, but actually to genuinely find out how their mates are doing and understand what their mates need from them at that moment in time, I think it can make a world of difference to people. So I applaud you for coming on here and thank you for doing it. I know that your story is absolutely going to help other guys. And if this the kind of mission of this show is anything, it's twofold. One is that each episode I want it to reach one person and make a positive difference to how they feel about their circumstances. And the second, and this is, I say this for the benefit of anybody that's listening to this because they know John and they haven't heard the show before, is if each episode can get me a guest for a future episode, then we can keep building this bank of conversations because there's such a breadth of experiences that people have been through that the more of those experiences we can cover, the more we can provide these relevant stories to people when they need them so that they don't necessarily go down the path and have the experiences that a great many of the guests we've had on the show are here to talk about. So thank you, John. Really appreciate you coming on board. And with that kind of context set about your why and why you're here, how has your last week been? Obviously, you were talking about kind of setting up for a 10th birthday party this week, but how has your last week been? How's your mental health been over the last week?
it's been good. I mean, the last week, so the last couple of weeks in my little world, kind of marketing, it's well, the last month or so has been event season. So last week I spent 3 days at Madfest. Um, and I spent the Tuesday evening at the Alliance of Independent Agency Awards, which I judge and have done every year. So last week was hectic, sweaty, um, but I got to meet some wonderful new friends. I got to catch up with lots of my existing friends. I saw some really inspirational talks. I saw some really shit talks. Um, so it was a very busy but lovely week. So yeah, kind of, and then at the weekend, my son had a football tournament. So his team have only been together for a year, and they've only won one or two matches all season. It's been a tough season. That's expected, apparently. We played one tournament once before where we didn't know at the time that they were pitched in with teams 2 or 3 leagues above them, and they took an absolute hiding.
Yeah,
So we weren't sure what was going to happen here, but they played so well. They came third in their group. Kept more clean. In fact, it's the only time they've ever kept clean sheets in their entire history. So, they come away from that buzzing. My son had a great time um, in planning his birthday, getting gifts. So he wants to have a party at my flat, which is a tiny little flat. We'll get onto why I'm in a tiny little flat later, I'm sure. But it's a tiny little flat, but he wants to have like 7 or 8 friends round here for a PlayStation and pizza party. Um, he's very into Fortnite. And so I decided, as I did last time we had a party here, I'll design him a poster. I used to be a creative, so I'll design him a little poster. Um, and he looked at it, he went, "Yeah, it's all right, Dad, but can we sit down and redesign it together?
Oh
Oh,
no.
right. So we sat down, and he's been learning Canva at school. It's good, Canva. I didn't really know it that well. I have used it, but so we actually designed a much better one together, and I've used that now to kind of design, and I've got sent out to print some kind of nice big happy birthday Stan's 10th birthday with a Fortnite avatar based on his face on it, and his two favorite rappers who are in the game. I've got printed life size, so we're going to have it up there so him and the boys could. So I've been really getting off on that. So I've had a lovely week. I don't know what I'll be like come the come down on Sunday. Um, although this week is looking to be busy because we've got one of his friends' parties Saturday morning. Then we come back here for his party, including that friend and a couple of others, Saturday afternoon. Sunday morning, he's got a football match, and then we've got a summer fete, and I'm on the PTA, so I'm going to be helping on the summer fete. So I'll probably be completely wasted by the end of this week.
Yeah, I would say I know how you're going to feel on Sunday.
Oh, been there.
Tired. You're going to feel tired.
Yeah.
You're going to be craving Monday, I suspect.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh,
Which is that's an unusual situation to be in, isn't it? Go, oh, just yeah, Monday. Time to just decompress by doing some work.
so basically, what you're saying is that Bob Geldof was never part of a PTA.
I get that. I don't know how many of our audience will. But I'm just going to leave it hanging. I don't need to explain that.
No.
Google it, guys. Google it. If you don't understand it, Google it. Awesome. Okay, right. So, context. You're having a good week. You're probably going to feel a little bit peaky come Sunday evening, possibly Monday morning, needing to get jacked up on some serious coffee juice on Monday to get through that one. But let's turn our attention now to your mental health journey and your experiences. And I always say to guests on this one, you can start this at whatever point you want to start it from. But really, what I want to understand is how has your relationship with your mental health evolved over the years? So from where perhaps you first started to recognize that you were experiencing some challenges through to where you are today.
Okay. I mean, to give it a bit of context, I was always kind of the strong friend. So I had lots of friends that would kind of, call me and lean on me, and even, with my family, my brothers, my mum, I was the strong guy. I kind of kept everything ticking over. Um, so it was a bit of a shock to the system when I found that I wasn't coping. And that, I'd had a couple of down periods in my life. But where it really came to a fore was when my youngest brother died in 2016. Um, so my parents split when I was quite young. Um, Dad moved out for the final time when I was 11. David was 4 at the time. We have another brother, Dean, who he would have been what, 7 maybe? Yeah, 7. So he would have been 7 at the time. And again, I what I was the strong guy. I tried to pick up. I probably tried to take on too much responsibility, but my youngest brother was like a son to me. I used to take him to all the things that I now take my son to. So I took him to football training. I took him to arcades, all that kind of stuff I did with him. And so I was kind of a father figure to him. As we grew up, we also became really close friends. We used to hang out a lot. Um, And yeah, he was a dancer. He was in musical theatre, and whenever he was on a tour, particularly when I was single, I'd travel up and down the country to go and see him. And we'd just hang out. We'd have the best times. We were kind of wild parties in Glasgow and Liverpool and all up and down the country. And I got to know all of his friends, and he got to know most of mine as well. So we had shared friend sets. But also he had a kid before I did. So when my now ex-wife was pregnant with Stanley, our first, it was Dave giving me the advice. It was Dave telling me I needed to learn to drive. It was Dave that gave me my first driving lesson. So he was a lot of things to me. And to the family, yeah, he came along at a time when our family was broken. Yeah, my dad had become unreliable. He was an alcoholic, petty criminal. Um, and it wasn't a very happy place to be. But we had this beautiful, smiley baby, this little boy. So he was the glue to our family.
Mm.
Um, and then suddenly he was gone. Suddenly he was gone. And my world just fell apart. My world absolutely fell apart. Kind of, I just couldn't reconcile it. And so I kind of went into a deep depression. Um, my son was 1 year old. We're not entirely sure the day that Dave died. I believe it was the birthday, um, which I put out of my mind. I don't reflect on that on Stan's birthday. I celebrate Stan's birthday. But there I was, 2016, with the center of my world gone. I shut down. I clammed up. I will always remember Stan sort of crawling up for me and giving me the biggest cuddle in the world the morning after I got the news. And it was such a wonderful thing. Yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. He was my rescue. Um, so I didn't deal with it initially, to the extent that my then wife threatened to leave if I didn't snap out of it, which at the time I took as a tactic to try to get me to snap out of it. I've since kind of discovered otherwise, hence me being having an ex-wife now. But it went on for some time, and one thing I remember really clearly, really vividly, is I wasn't in a world I wanted to live in anymore. The world wasn't right. I loved my son. I knew I needed to be there for my son, but the world wasn't right anymore, and I didn't like it. I'd had some suicidal thoughts. And the one thing that actually gave me any comfort, I guess, and it's a ridiculous thing to saying it out loud when you hear it, but I basically managed to convince myself that if I could fast forward 17 years until my son was 18 and kill myself, that's what I'd do, but I can't. So I'm just going to have to get on with it. And that sort of gave me something to cling on to. Um, and then I did some CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, yep. And that helped. That did help. It allowed me to function again. Um, but I'd spent 18 months, at least 18 months, in social isolation out of my own choice. I hadn't seen any friends. I was functioning at work. I was going to work events. I remember we did a project with Manchester United at the agency I was at, and it won an award. And I was the front man of the agency. I was co-founder. I had to go up to Manchester and party with them, and it was. I remember at the time thinking, but I don't want to do this. I don't even do this with people I know very well. And, my client is a friend now. Falco is a good friend, and I'd have no problem telling him how I feel about things. But back then he was the client, and so I'd go into performance mode at work, and I'd be just everything locked up in my kid. And I remember kind of at the time I was working from the office 4 days a week and working from home with Stan. So we'd have Stanley Daddy Day on a Thursday, and we'd sometimes do different things, but quite often we'd go for a little walk. We'd go to a little playground that we called the Triangle Playground, just off of Newton Green in London. We'd then walk down New River Path, which kind of takes us down towards Islington. And there's a little stream and there's ducks and another little playground. And I'd be wheeling him down there in his pram, and he'd get out and he'd kind of go for a little walk in there. And just that vision of him kind of walking in front of me is something that I got into the habit of recalling whenever I was feeling low. Um, just the little joy of being with him. And then we'd get to the other end, we'd go for a coffee, and obviously he'll have a baby chino. We'd share a cake. I'd put him in his pram, he'd fall asleep, and I'd wheel him back home and get back on with work. but I was barely functioning. So it was at least 18 months, 2 years maybe, until I was able to spend any time with my friends. And it, he passed away between, so one of my best friends from uni, Don, we'd been on his stag do, I think the week before maybe, or a couple of weeks before Dave died, and his wedding was after. Um, and I couldn't not go, but I couldn't stay. So I kind of went and as soon as the ceremony was over, just got out there, because what I really came to fear, funnily enough, given what we're doing here today, is being asked how I am. Because how can you say to someone, as dark as I was then, yeah, how am I? Well, I want to die. How are you? So I avoided life for quite a long time, and but sort of managed to come through that, and then kind of, while still not having quite dealt with it, I kind of had a difficult time. There were some changes at the business that kind of, and I knew it was time for me to leave. So I was leaving the business that I co-founded. I'd been diagnosed with skin cancer. Um, my mind just went to fluff again. Um, I later discovered that during a trip to visit my then sister-in-law, the sister-in-law talked my wife out of leaving me again. I don't, yeah, there seems to be a pattern developing. Um, but sort of dragged myself through that. I think that's when I did the CBT, possibly. Um, but I'd never really dealt with it. Never really dealt with it. Hadn't really spoken about it. And then we went into lockdown. So I had, having spent a year or so trying to get a consultancy off the ground, I was introduced to Nick de Jong, who runs the NDL group, which in promotional marketing is, kind of fairly legendary business, to be fair. They kind of started the category of prize and winner management. That never used to be a thing until he had the idea maybe 30 years ago now. And I was introduced to him to do some consulting work. And he just kind of said, well, look, we're going to do something together. I'd like to offer you a full-time job, and there are 5 roles that I think you would do brilliantly for me in. Let's have a think about what the right one was. And so beginning of 2020, I started working there as what was I, head of creative solutions. So basically my job was to take in briefs, have brilliant ideas, pitch them, and keep the client happy. As a now former creative, as a kind of commercially focused creative at the time, absolute dream. Kind of we had our tiny little flat. We had a first floor flat in Stoke Newington, Newton Green. We'd finally had our much awaited second kid. We'd been trying for years. I'd given up. I didn't think it was going to happen. And then, suddenly Jen walked into the living room holding kind of a pregnancy test. And I thought, oh my God, Jesus. And so we were due our second baby. And she came late 2019. So we had our baby. The flat was too small. We put the flat on the market. We were looking at a forever home, just on the outskirts of London towards northwest, because that's where NDL were, and it was suitable for where my wife at the time worked. And then we came into lockdown, which meant, of course, we had to take the flat off the market. We couldn't go to see other places. And there were now 4 of us in what was a 1-bed flat. As a former architect, I saw the potential when we first saw it to make a single bedroom in there for Stan, which we did. So there's the living room next to that, Stan's bedroom, next to that, our bedroom. And so I'm at my new job. I'd been kind of pulled out of my comfort zone. Well, not out of my comfort zone, out of my cruise, I guess, of kind of just doing this creative job. Because I'd run basically a rival. And as we came to realize in the first few weeks that we'd been there, I was pitching and winning clients and briefs that they should have been winning. But for now, I'm on the inside. So I got pulled more into the senior leadership team, got more involved with the finances, bringing the 3 businesses that made the group up together. So my job had become a lot more stressful. I was involved in conversations about who do we furlough, who do we let go. My daughter was 6 months old, very demanding on my wife, basically on her chest 24 hours a day. Our son, we didn't know at the time, had ADHD, very much an outdoors kid. He's bouncing off the walls. And I remember my father-in-law at the time kind of saying, "Look, I'm really worried about you guys. I'm really worried because of that flat. I just think it's a horrible situation you're in." And he was right. It didn't last. I think we got to the point where we were just walking on eggshells around each other. Um, I was sat in the other room. She's saying, "Don't disturb Dad." The kids are getting more and more wound up, and I'm trying not to get involved. And then eventually, I'm coming out and sort of just kind of laying down the law a little bit, I guess. Yeah, I'm very much about kind of setting down parameters. But then I wasn't living in the mayhem. Yeah, I was next door to the mayhem or two doors away from it. And so I went out to do the shopping one day. I came back and they were all gone. Um, and that was, we were still in the first lockdown. Didn't make it beyond the first lockdown. She'd gone. She'd taken the kids somewhere and to start with wouldn't tell me where. And after a few weeks, maybe, I don't know, she allowed me to see the kids, but only in a public park. It's all very odd. Um, and then there was a day it was raining, and it was I'd managed to kind of talk her into letting me speak to the kids 3 times a day on FaceTime. So, I felt I needed to say good morning to my kids. I needed to say hello to my kids when I finished work, and I needed to say good night to my kids. Um, and there was a day that I drove down there and it rained, and I was almost in tears because that was going to take away my day with my kids. But she let me into the flat that they were living at, which was an absolute mess. Um, but she's got 2 kids, including a newborn. And I can see it all through her eyes. I can see it all through her eyes. But I think, she made the wrong decision ultimately. But as I came to realize, it was a decision she was always going to make. So looking back, without going poor little me, she threatened to leave me when my brother had died. She was planning on leaving me when I had cancer and was going through an awkward time at work. And here we are in lockdown, and that's it. She's gone. So then she eventually turned up where I'm now in Loughton. So she's from around this area. She wanted to move the kids somewhere to get them into school when the schools reopened. Um, and to start with, I was kind of driving up to see them 2 or 3 times a week from Hackney. Um, and I just had it very strongly in my head that, yeah, the only thing that she could do, the only thing she could do in the situation we're in was to leave. And of course, she was going to leave with the kids. It's not what I would have done, but equally the dynamic's different, gender is different, who knows? But she did the only thing she could do. But it was ultimately the wrong thing. Yeah, we were better as a family. So I needed to move to Loughton to show her that. It also meant that I wasn't going to be spending so much time on the roads because getting here wasn't too bad. Getting back was a bloody nightmare. So I moved up to Loughton. I There's not many flats in Loughton. There's some huge houses down the road. I'm not in the rich area, but there's not many flats. It's all kind of family houses. So I got I got this flat that I'm in now, little 2-bedroom flat. I was trying to get a 6-month lease because I was hopeful at the time I wouldn't need to be here much longer than that. And I'd even said to the estate agent, look, I'm moving here to get my family back together. I want to show, not tell, my wife that we are better together and that there's this once in a generation, in fact, not even once in a generation, that just combination of events that was not even possible to happen again, of this brand new baby, of an ADHD boy, of a first floor flat without a garden, and a global pandemic. new job, kind of various other bits and pieces. It's just not possible to happen again. I need to show what life is like without that. And so we started counselling. I got a counsellor who we felt like we were making progress. Kind of it got to the point where the counsellor actually said, to Jen, do you see there any possibility of getting back together? And she said, I don't know, maybe. And then that conversation carried on a little bit, and then it got to, would you be willing to maybe trial spending a weekend or a week together? And she was like, possibly. And then we went into another lockdown. And Jen, off the back of that, said, right, Abby's on your side. We're not using her again. All the progress had been unraveled.
Mm.
And I was heartbroken. And this was coming up towards Christmas. So my brother's birthday, December the 11th. It's the first time I'd ever been completely alone on his birthday. And alone in, every sense. I'm in a town where I know nobody. I'm estranged from my wife and my kids. Um, my remaining brother sounds awful. My other brother and my mum. Well, my mum had decided to take the opportunity when Jenna told her. Here's the funny thing, where she kind of messaged me and said, message like, I've let your mum know because I think you're going to need some support. It's going to be difficult for you when she first left. And my first thought there at the time was, oh, please don't do that. My mum is just, she's not supportive, she's judgmental. And so what happened was, off the back of a conversation that should have been, how are you? What's going on? It got to, why don't you call your brother and make up with him? I was like, we're fine. We're fine. We don't need to be part of each other's life. And she accused me of starting the argument that it kind of meant he and I drifted apart, which isn't what happened. And my other brother, of course, throw it all in. My other brother was in the room with us when it happened. And he had said to my mum, no, Dean started that argument, John didn't. So even in my nuclear family, he was the only one that would back me. So he was very special. And so I'm on my own. I'm alone for his birthday, and it's the hardest day of my life. I I felt awful. Everything just closed down. Everything hurt, and I just knew at that point that I couldn't continue. Um, but it was too close to Christmas, so I knew what I was going to do. I couldn't swim at the time, so it's quite obvious to me what I was going to do, and I knew where. I couldn't do it before Christmas. I couldn't ruin Christmas for the kids forever. So it had to be sometime between Christmas and my brother's birthday the next year. I was absolutely set on it. It was a done deal, and it gave me some clarity. And at that point, I was having a weekly call with Gemma, who I mentioned earlier. We were just kind of catching up. She'd been through mental health issues herself, and had spoken publicly about it, and had been a brilliant friend. Has been a brilliant friend. Is a brilliant friend. And she just said, "Well, look, if you're going to do it, fine, but do me a favor. Just speak to a doctor first. Just speak to a doctor. And if you're still going to do it, we had a pact at the time of if one goes, we both go. Um, not not quite a pact, but it was something that she said. And so I did. And I was perfectly level-headed with it, I thought. And then I immediately got put on the high risk list. I had the Samaritans call me. Um, I had an appointment with a mental health professional, and it all went so fast. It all went so fast, and it kind of got to the point of it was just really good to speak to someone that understood the situation and had been there and helped people. Obviously, it was great speaking to Jem, but I got prescribed citalopram, antidepressants. And the suicidal thoughts just stopped instantly. I still wasn't a whole person, but the suicidal thoughts stopped. So I knew the relationship was over. I knew I was now in Loughton. And I knew that I wanted to see my kids grow up. And that's what I've been trying to do since. But yeah, it's funny that the things you notice. So I mentioned earlier, deliberately named my friend Don. So sadly, his daughter passed away last year, age 13, with a very rare and aggressive cancer. She'd been diagnosed a year before. Other than the funeral, nobody's seen Don for 2 years. Understandable, you know. Been there, not quite the same. It's his daughter rather than his brother, who is like a son to me. But a couple of weeks ago, I kind of stumbled across a USB drive looking for some old work stuff, plugged it in, and there were a series of videos of my brother from a memorial that we hold for him. And I sat and watched them, and it was lovely. I had a little tear, but a tear of pride. This was him at his best. This was him making his West End debut. This was him on a TV dancing talent show, making the judge cry because he was so, kind of vulnerable himself as a dancer. He was able to do that. And I sort of realized it's taken me 8 years. It's taken me 8 years to get to the point where the pain of losing Dave has gone. Still miss him every day, but the pain has kind of subsided. And the pride is there. I enjoy looking at his videos. I enjoy seeing his face. Still miss him dearly, but and I said to Don when he, bunch of architecture blokes. We saw him at the funeral. We did a charity Tough Mudder run as a fundraiser. So the Esme Enrique Foundation, if anybody wants to donate. But socially, we'd only seen him this one time, and I was the first one there before him. And I just kind of said to him that, I'm so glad you're out. I'm not here to tell you anything, but I just want to let you know that I'd seen this video of Dave. It's taken me 8 years. It's taken me 8 years, and now I am so happy to have had the time with him that I had, and not just the loss. It will come. It will come. Stick with it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, John. I know I could see on your face that at the times throughout that was hard. It's hard to say some of those things, and it's all the more important because it's hard.
Yeah, 100%.
I started to make some questions, but I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying. But is it okay if I kind of take you back through some of what you've just said there and ask you a couple of extra questions about it?
Of course, of course.
And obviously, it goes without saying that if these are not things that you are comfortable talking about today, then you just need to let me know and we'll move on. But you said kind of quite close to the start of when you were describing what had happened to David, that you didn't deal with it, and that your wife had threatened to leave. That was the first time I think you said that your wife had threatened to leave.
Yeah.
When when you say you didn't deal with it, how did that manifest itself?
Um, I mean, I was just barely present. I spent time with my son, but I was just a shell of a human. I was just, yeah, I was broken, genuinely broken, a total shell of a human. Um, I would work. I would come home from work. I mean, my son was 1, so there wasn't a huge amount of engagement. It's not like it was homework or anything, but I'd spend a bit of time with my son, cuddle my son, and then just sit there. So I'd got to the point where I used to love to read, and I still haven't read any fiction since then. Um, I used to like reading fiction. I used to like reading kind of historical stuff, marketing stuff. All I read now is marketing stuff, so I haven't gone back to that. Um, I stopped watching movies, which I have got back to. I stopped watching TV. I have got back to. Um, Reading is the one thing that I haven't got back to at all, and one thing that I don't think I will ever get back to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it. Is I actually enjoyed the musical theatre scene. And I used to go to see not just David, I used to go to see his friends, and I used to just go to see shows. Um, I think I probably over-egged the pudding when Dreamgirls came out here, which my ex-wife was a huge fan of, and it had never been put on as a stage show in the UK. So when it was, I bought her tickets, and it clearly wasn't long enough after David died. Took her to it and basically just sat and sobbed to the extent that it hurt my chest throughout the entire show. Um, but yeah, I stopped functioning as a human. My social life, my friends would be, I'd ignore any calls. I'd occasionally politely reply to a text. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just wasn't there. I just wasn't there.
Circumstances are completely different, and should never compare or you know, talk in comparative terms. But my personal experience of depression was very similar to that. The trigger for it was very different, but there's a the world is happening to you,
Yeah.
and you feel like you have no agency, but you don't really want any agency either. You just kind of it's just a matter of time until it stops.
Yes.
Um, Now, interesting that you went through CBT and that was effective for you. Again, similar experience for me. I went through CBT and I found it incredibly powerful, but there was a very specific instance where I was able to see how tangible the impact was.
Mm.
I don't I don't know if you had an equivalent to that, where there was a specific thing that you remember thinking, shit, this is actually working for me. This is a useful thing to learn or a skill to develop. But I also don't think I actively use it in my day to day. I'm not subconsciously using it. I think I probably am subconsciously using some of those techniques, but I don't know that I'm actively thinking about it. Did you have? Was there a specific thing that you could recall that kind of suddenly clicked for you, where you thought, I get how this works. I can see how this is going to help me.
Externally, no, I don't think there was. I mean, what as we went through the program, I could see that we were ticking more things off and that we were making progress. So I'm naturally an open-minded cynic. Okay, so I'm always happy to be proven wrong. Um, yeah, I didn't know if this was going to work for me, but I was willing to go into it kind of, open-minded. So kind of seeing it making a difference after each session, seeing the progress that we'd made, that and kind of probably, I suppose if there was a time, it was the first time that I went to anything social with my friends. So, kind of the guys and girls, whether or not it's wives or other people. So architects are at school together for a very long time. Okay, so I might not be in architecture anymore, but my friends and my oldest group of friends are architects. And so, yeah, my closest group of friends are architects. And so, we go back 25, 30 years. And it'd been a long time since I'd gone to any social event. And I can't remember which the first was, but it would have been that, going there and actually knowing that if someone asked how I was, I had an answer.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think it was probably that. But what I haven't done subconsciously, as you say, maybe, but I haven't consciously tried to put it back into action since. Maybe I could have done, maybe I should have done.
Mm.
But it solved a problem at the time. It made me semi-human again when I wasn't human. It made me socially functional, um, albeit because I kind of got to the point where everything seemed to be frivolous, and I had no time for frivolity.
Yeah.
Books were frivolous, TV were frivolous, going out friends was frivolous, friends were frivolous. It was all just frivolous. Everything was pointless now. Everything was pointless in a world without David, except for my son. Um, and I remember kind of saying to my ex-wife at the time, and not in a critical way. Yeah, it wasn't a case of you weren't good enough. It was like, honestly, the only thing that's got me through this is Stanley. Knowing he's there and knowing I need to be a father to him. You know, one of the things that I had kind of reflected on, there was I wish I could fast forward 18 years, but the other thing was my nephew was now going to grow up without a father, and I didn't want that for my son. But that's all I was. That was all I was. And CBT helped me become more of a human again. Still not back to the person I was, and maybe I never will be that person again. Um, don't mind a bit of frivolity. Don't mind a bit of silliness. Don't mind dropping the C bomb on a podcast just for the sake of it. Just to be the first person. Look, Mum, you proud of me now?
Yeah. So for the listeners in the audience, when John and I had a brief sort of chat pre-recording, he said, I said that no one had ever done that before, and he said, I take that as a personal challenge. So there you go. John has delivered against that KPI.
I have, and it's the most frivolous and pointless thing in the world, and I've done it, and I wouldn't have done before CBT. But so there you go. There's CBT has meant that I've battered your eardrums with a sweary.
Makes me wonder what CBT could stand for, but let's not go there. So it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that kind of thought that you'd had about waiting until your son had reached 18 years old and then taking your life. Are you kind of conscious of what point you stopped feeling that way?
Yeah, yeah. It was partway through the CBT. It was as we were making progress, and it was kind of like, I could see a life for me again. I could see a life. And the world was never going to be right again. A world without Dave is never right. And it's still not right, but there's still a world I can live in. And so I certainly got to that point. I certainly got to that point, and kind of, but so much of it was tied up in my kids, or Stanley as it was at the time. Dina wasn't born until later, which I guess kind of proves that there was a bit of a recovery in between because I had another kid. But so much was tied in with Stan. And so kind of when we got to that point in lockdown where I hadn't even had a chance to get to know my daughter at the time because she'd been on her mum the whole time. So we hadn't even really had the opportunity to bond. Stan obviously had gone and his behavior was getting worse. again, it was ADHD. It wasn't anything I was doing. It wasn't anything she was doing. It was ADHD. Um, and we were kind of trying to manage him in the way that you would maybe a normal kid by telling them off. And it's just not the way that you do it. I've kind of done the courses now. Um, but a world without my kids, which is what happened going into that second lockdown, or what looked, because at that time I wasn't allowed to spend time with my kids away from her.
Mm.
Um, that's not something I could have lived with. I'd lost Dave, and I was not going to be, I was losing my kids. And that's when everything really kind of sped up quite quickly in my brain. Yeah, because I was hopeful. I was hopeful before then. I knew, and I still know, that we were better together. Having said that, I've come to terms with the fact that we're separated, and having reflected and, as I said, kind of picked up those two or three things that had happened in the past, I suspect something like that was always going to happen. And I sort of saw a side that I didn't like and I'm happy to live without. So, it's not like I'm pining for her. We get on absolutely fine, by the way. We have a we have a good working relationship. It's not stern. The paperwork has come through. You know, I now have the kids roughly half the week. We have a couple of nights where we'll have one each so that they get some quality time with each parent, and other times when they're together. So this morning I had my daughter overnight last night. She's a hilarious little monster. Um, so I took her into school. Jen took my son into school. I gave her a lift to the station afterwards. Absolutely fine. Yeah, that's where we are now. But a world without those kids, with the fact that I hadn't fundamentally dealt with the issue of losing Dave, what I'd done, what CBT does is it trains you to reframe how
Yeah.
you see the world a little bit. But that world had gone again. That world had completely gone, losing my kids. Um, yeah, so it all kind of came back again. Yeah, and would I have been like that had I lost the kids and not lost my brother? I don't know. But everything went back to that. And the fact that the only thing that kept me going was the kids, and in particular Stan, because he was around.
Mm. You're right about CBT. It doesn't address, and I think that's probably one of the big criticisms of it as a technique, is that it doesn't address the underlying causes. It helps you to deal with the situation. Um, have you subsequently sought out any further kind of professional mental health support, whether through counselling or therapy, to help you work through the grief and the implications of the grief, and to kind of to help you process that? Because I know you've obviously said that 8 years on, you're feeling differently about the loss of David's. But have you had those conversations with a professional to help you through that? Are you confident that you now have dealt with the kind of the underlying causes?
I mean, I had a couple of sessions when I first spoke to the GP, as Gemma recommended. There's been nothing formal since. I mean, as I said, I was put on citalopram, and I'm still on citalopram. Um, but maybe I'm pig-headed. I just started to have such clarity
Mm.
that I didn't feel the need to. And if there are people watching or listening to this that don't have that, that's absolutely fine. None of this is judgmental. It's not a by numbers situation. Okay. Yeah. And again, it doesn't matter who you are or how successful you are. I was the strong friend. Um, I was successful in my work. I founded my own business. I was earning more than all my friends. I'm seen as being fairly successful in my industry. I've had some great jobs, spent some time at Lego. Um, doesn't matter. None of that matters. None of that matters. None of that affects depression. and suicidal tendencies. None of it does. Yeah, and a lot of it's chemical. That's why citalopram helps. That's why I believe played a part in my the way my wife behaved with, or behaved is an incorrect way of saying it, but the way my wife reacted to the kind of lockdown situation, yeah, with a very young baby. It's not unusual for people to struggle. She wasn't even getting any sleep, which again really makes a difference. Um, as does physical exercise, by the way. But no, I just had being here, watching it happen, what having that clarity of what had actually happened, and realizing, okay, this is my life now. There's no judgment with my ex-wife. Yeah, it was me that suggested getting divorced, and it was along the cases of, yeah, we should just get this done, shouldn't we? Oh, okay, fine, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, she'd already moved on and started seeing someone. I think I'd started seeing someone. It's just kind of practical. But I have such joy with my kids. And yeah, now 5 years down the line, it's funny because, as I say, I moved here during lockdown, and I had one friend in the town. What I didn't realize to start with is that my ex-wife, who moved here because she has friends in the area that she went to school with, my wife had asked my friend to help her find a house to move into, um, which really hurt. I felt really abandoned through that as well. Of course, what I later discovered is that my friend didn't realize I wasn't part of the situation. She thought it was me as well. So no friend in town. I've got one friend who lives a few towns down, and I saw him a couple of times between lockdowns. Otherwise, completely isolated. Up here, second floor of my two-bedroom flat. Um, and I started to kind of go once or twice a week, sit outside my local pub by myself, have a beer, read a book once or twice a week, just to get out and see humans. Um, and that went on for years, yeah, years. And it's funny, I was in there on Sunday, and Dave at the bar bought me a pint. Oh, bloody hell, okay. And suddenly I realized that, all right, most of the bar staff know that I drink neck oil. Quite a few people here know my name and know a bit about me. Oh, and I'm on the PTA. I've just been going around the high street kind of asking for raffle prizes. Maybe I've settled into Loughton now. Yeah, maybe this is my life. Oh, actually, I quite like this community thing. I enjoyed that when we were in Hackney. I was part of the PTA of my son's school there. I knew a lot of the local business owners, um, and life's good. Like life feels good, kind of. Yeah. So it's just having that clarity, and part of it. I'm a marketer by trade. Um, I can recognize good writing. I can recognize honest writing, authentic writing. And a lot of what I do for my business is, I write stuff about marketing that shows my expertise, and I post it out on LinkedIn. I make webinars and little videos. But also, as I said to you before, I think it's important to talk. I have allowed myself to be vulnerable on the same platforms and talk about my problems. And that's really helped me. That has really helped me. You know, laying it all out there, being completely open, being completely vulnerable, hoping it's going to help one other person. To your point, if one person sees this, it's all worth it. You know, and having people message me to talk about it, and then people getting in touch with me. So Punit, who's someone that I only ever really knew on Twitter. And we've met a few times, and he's had mental health issues, and we've talked about kind of men's mental health, the fact that we don't talk, um, and it's something that we talked about. How can we help this? And Richard Huntington, kind of from Saatchi and Saatchi, he's every third Thursday, I think it is, of the month. We have a breakfast meetup. Random people. Some of us are fairly regular, others of us aren't. And we just talk about mental health. It's not a networking thing. It's just mental health. And the more I do it, the more empowered I feel, and the more I feel that I've developed the skills to deal with it. So, yeah, to be blunt and slightly dark for a change, um, there is only one thing that would put me back in that place, and that would be losing my kids. Yeah, or yeah, my son dying. I don't think I could live with that. Anything else I can live with. Anything else I can live with. And my life isn't just built around my son now or my kids, but they're the most important things in my world. And I spend time with them. I've got a relationship with them. We have Dina Daddy nights. We have Stanley Daddy nights. They both like cooking with me, which is lovely. Stan cooked a pasta dish with his mum last night and brought me some cold leftovers this morning because he wanted me to try it. Um, and I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have had that. But I didn't see that that was going to happen. None of this was going to happen. I've hung on long enough that it has, and I can talk about it, and I can talk about it now without hiding anything. There's been a lot of tears, there's been a lot of pain over the last few years. I can talk about it without crying now, um, which isn't a weakness. Again, it's not a weakness. I don't mind crying, but it, some of it now feels like I mean, I know it's me, but it's not the person I am now. It's not the person I'm now. I've developed into a different person.
I'm gonna push back on that because I think it is the person you are now. It's what's made you the person you are now.
Yes, yeah,
Um, and the the rawness has subsided. And I think the other thing that I've observed in other people and in myself is that it doesn't mean that you're infallible. It doesn't mean that you're not going to slip again.
no,
Future, and you don't know what could cause you to slip. Little things, just the wrong day, little thing that would normally be fine. But what you do learn is that you can get back on the horse
yeah.
a lot quicker because of the experience and because of the skills that you've developed. And I describe it to people as by now I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The trouble is that sometimes I don't know how many curves there are in the tunnel, but I know that there is a light still at the end of it. And sometimes it feels like you're just doing this an awful lot.
Yeah.
But eventually you will get to that point where you're on the other side of it.
That's a brilliant metaphor. Brilliant metaphor. I love that because that was one of the things I remember at the time saying to, I don't know, the mental health professional that I spoke to. It's like, there is no light. There is no light. Yeah, it's all gone. But yeah, to your point, no, I didn't see it because I was around a bend.
Yeah. I feel like we may have answered a lot of the next question already, but I'm going to ask it again with a slightly different context. And so the fourth question is, what were, ironically, light at the end of the tunnel? What were the sort of the light bulb moments on your journey? But you've already articulated a number of those experiences. But I guess to ask you, so we're not kind of repeating the same stuff. Were there any other kind of moments along the way that you've not mentioned so far that had a kind of had an impact? So it could be realizing that there was a thing that you now knew that you needed to do, but it could equally be realizing that there was something that you needed to stop doing that was ultimately going to help you.
I mean, I've kind of alluded to it a bit, but yeah, kind of coming to the realization that I didn't actually want to be in a relationship with my wife anymore. That it wasn't just a case of I'd lost out. It was, no, actually, I don't love this person. I don't want to be with this person that I've seen. That was a big moment for me. Because I remember kind of saying to her once, look, I don't want you to regret having made the wrong decision because it's too late. And that wasn't about suicide. That was just, our lives go different ways. Um, but yeah, kind of getting to that point where I just don't want to be with this person. Okay, we can get on fine, but I don't want my relationship back. And when I moved here, I wanted my family back. It wasn't just about my kids. I wanted my family back. I very much saw myself as a family man. Kind of our last flat, I was constantly building and creating and fixing things to make more space because it was a tiny little flat. And I quite liked doing that. And, kind of, I maybe turn into a stereotypical dad with my bloody tool belt. But yeah, that realization was strong. And then the other one that really struck me, um, so I was never a swimmer when I was a kid. And having gone through the period of being allowed to see my kids without their mum being there, having my kids stay over, and then actually a few years ago being able to take my kids on holiday. So that would have been what, I don't know, maybe 21, 22. I'm thinking, fuck, I ought to do the swimming stuff. So I started doing swimming lessons. I was doing that for a few months until it suddenly struck me, oh bollocks, I've just taken away my escape route because my plan was drowning because I couldn't swim. And what I didn't want to do, I didn't want I didn't want to be rescued. It wasn't going to be a cry for help. I wanted out. Um, and I always remember Jen saying when we were together. There was um there was a TV presenter, kids TV presenter, whose girlfriend, I think, had basically died in the bath at their flat. She'd done a ton of cocaine. She got in the bath and she died of whatever degree burns. And he was found a little while later up in the rafters at a train station. He'd hung himself. And I always remember Jen saying, it's actually a really caring thing that he's done because he didn't want his family to have to find it. And so part of my thinking was, right, okay, um, I can't do that. I don't want to be found. I don't want it to be something that I could stop or something that someone could preserve. I didn't want anyone that I knew to have to find me and deal with that. So throwing myself into the river. So basically, the plan was, I'd drive bridge to bridge in the Thames until I could find one where there's nobody there that will stop me, and that's it. I'm done. Um, and then yeah, there I am in the pool going, shit, I've just taken out my escape route. And that was a really empowering moment because I hadn't thought of it at all. I hadn't thought when I signed up. I hadn't sort of thought of it when I was progressing. Still not very good, but it was a real. I was proud of myself. I was like, bloody hell, I've come a long way. And I think that's one of the other things. You have to give yourself a pat on the back because it's not easy. It's not linear. Um, and so that was a big one for me. That was a really big one for me, realizing that I'd done that. And I just kind of sat there and chuckled to myself. So, if it did all go dark again, fuck knows what I'm gonna do next time.
And it's a measure of progress, not to kind of make light of what is incredibly serious subject matter, but I think the fact that we could both sit here with a slight sort of smirk on our face as you're explaining that
Yeah.
shows the progress as well. So to your point about don't just pat yourself on the back with one arm, John. Go both. Go both. Give yourself a massive hug, mate.
Thank you.
The final question is if somebody hears this and they've had a similar experience or they find themselves in a similar situation, based purely on your lived experiences, not as an expert or an authority on these matters, what's the most important thing that they can do?
Speak to someone. Speak to someone. Speak to anyone. Speak to me. There are lots of us out there that have been through either what you're going through or something that's very similar to what you're going through, or living through the same impacts of a different situation. And it's things are changing slowly. People are talking, people are listening, men are able to talk and share more. If there's someone in your network you think you can talk to, a friend you think you can talk to, a professional you think you can talk to, just speak. And if you can't, if you're on Twitter, I'm Johnny Ego. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm John P. Lyons. You'll see me with my hat on. Or drop me an email, john@johnlyons.co.uk. I'm here to speak to anybody and everybody that needs this. And kind of, I love what you're doing, Dan. I fully support it. It's needed. And the more of us that can get out there and do this and show that you're not alone, because that's the thing. You think you're alone, you feel isolated. Regardless of lockdown and actually being isolated, you feel isolated. Of course you do. You feel like you're a burden. You feel like there's no way out. You feel like you don't want to drag people down with you. You're not dragging people down with you. Speak. Just allow yourself to speak to someone. What's the worst that can happen? Worst that could happen for me was I got talked out of it. And here I am now, really looking forward to my son's 10th birthday party and his life-size printouts of Juice WRLD and Travis Scott and 9-10-year-olds sitting around roasting each other and talking about their balls, probably. But you know what? I love my life. I love my life now. It's not about loving me, but the life I have now, the friends I have, back now, part of my friend group again, made new friends around here, feel part of the community around here, my kids. I'm so glad I didn't do what felt like the only thing to do. So, speak to someone, as Gemma said to me, speak to the doctor or speak to someone. She said, speak to the doctor. And if you still want to do it, that's down to you. So, I'm not going to talk anyone out of anything, but I am here to talk to anybody and I'm here to listen. You're not alone.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And I will make sure, obviously, that you are tagged in these posts as well on the socials when we share the episode. John, thank you so much for being so candid and open. As I said at the start, I know that someone somewhere at some time is going to hear this and it's going to make a difference to them, a positive difference to them. So I really appreciate that you have come on board and shared your story today. This is part of our kind of growing bank of conversations, right, that we're trying to build with this show. It's about giving people a platform to share their experiences to help other people. And each experience of every guest that we've had on is completely unique, but it's real. Yeah. And it is, these are guys who have been through it and have learned something really important about themselves along the way that might help other people. So I'm incredibly grateful that you've done this. To the audience, whether you're listening or watching, thank you for joining us for this conversation. I hope you found it helpful. If you have found it helpful, there are a number of things that you can do that can really help us. Number one is you can share this through your own social media channels. Like, comment, share links to the teasers and the episodes. If you know somebody who you think directly needs to see this, please send it to them directly. Make sure that you give them the best chance of seeing it and consuming it, because it's only through you doing things like that that we can help this to spread and get it in front of the people that really need it. If you're listening to this on one of the podcasting platforms, reviews. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say, but if you give us a 5-star review, the more of those we get, the more people this will be served to, and again, the more people it can help. So all of those things can play a big role in helping to get this to the right people at the right time. And I guess last but by no means least, if you've heard this and you feel like you could come forward and share your story on a future episode of the show, my contact details are all over all of the channels. I would love to hear from you. It's only by getting more people to come on that we can keep this going, keep building out all of the conversations so they're there for people when they need them. So thank you, John. Thank you to everybody for listening and watching. We'll be back again soon with another episode of Good Enough Chats.